All right, everyone, welcome to the last session of strategic management in a post-Christian era for this class. And if you'll excuse me, I'm feeling a little under the weather, so if I'm a little scratchy in my voice, please excuse that this evening. We've got a lot of really good stuff to go over this evening as we continue to explore how ancient biblical wisdom informs modern business practices, and as we continue to walk through this process of strategic management. Tonight we are going to be looking specifically at the implementation process and some of the concerns that we need to kind of think through ahead of time, and some things that we can expect. And then finally we're going to close with a look at the process of evaluating our strategy and what that looks like to make sure that we're basically staying on track to realize the vision that we set forth to begin with. And as we look at that, let's go ahead and take a refresh on the actual comprehensive strategic management model. Again, a reminder that we are receiving feedback from multiple sources through this entire process, so that we can make sure that we formulate the proper strategy, implement it well, and evaluate ourselves in a way that's going to be fruitful. So the first thing that we did is we developed a written vision and mission statement. We communicated with as many people as was prudent, and then we looked at internal and external factors to identify what our strengths and weaknesses are as an organization, our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Then we talked about long-term objectives, typically 2 to 5 years. We evaluated some different strategies that are available to us and kind of talked about how we would go about choosing those and using some quantitative methods to choose the best strategy that's really the most appropriate given the circumstances and the data that we've collected. Then we talked a little bit about establishing policies and annual objectives in order to support that those long-term goals and ultimately the vision and mission. We talked a little bit about allocating resources. Okay, and so now we're getting down to really the nitty-gritty of actually taking this strategy that we've chosen and actually getting it into the hands of the people who are going to be doing the work in order to see this thing through. And so let's go ahead and take a look at that. The nature of strategy implementation. When we talk about doing things to the glory of God, the scripture came to my mind. Then the Lord said to Gideon, "The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, 'My own hand has saved me.'" So the context of this is you have Israel, who is basically at war, and God actually dwindles their resources, their human resources, down to a nominal number, so that He could receive the glory. And they would be in awe of what He has accomplished. So as small business owners, to me, that's extremely encouraging, because so often in times that we're trying to engage in business and enter new markets and be creative within our small businesses, it seems like the odds are stacked against us. And a lot of times they are. But those are exactly the situations that God likes to step in and show His power and His grace and His mercy in the midst of us. And really, when we have small businesses that glorify God, there's no better way to be successful than something that comes from the hand of God. Why? Well, it says that all good gifts come down from the Father of lights, with whom there's no shifting of shadow. And if you go back to businessmen like Abraham, God multiplied his flocks. You look at Solomon, one of the wealthiest kings to ever live, because of the wisdom that God gave him. So it's pretty amazing. But as we talk about strategy implementation, this is where we have to understand that it's not all about us as strategists, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as managers and leaders, that we actually get to be a part of something bigger than us. And this comes back to this idea of quarterbacks and touchdowns. We can get together with the most intelligent, most experienced NFL players, and we can develop some plays that are just absolutely amazing. Like, you would almost want to say, can't lose plays. But the problem is that if it's not implemented properly when it comes game time, then you're not going to score touchdowns. So the implementation phase is so much more important than even the development of the strategy, particularly having a strategy that is actually embraced by as many people and as passionately within the organization as possible, because it's going to affect their daily life, and that's going to stir some things up. If you bring a new strategy into someone's life, or if you bring change into the lives of your employees, that can typically add stress, anxiety. And if we do it properly, though, if we've educated them well and we've explained things, particularly the ones who have actually participated in the process up till now, the more they participated, the more vested interest they're going to feel, and the more they're going to be on board with it. So that's, again, why we wanted to include as many people as possible through the entire process. Triggered. You're going to have some people who are in, you're going to have some people in your organization who really like the way things are, and they're not going to want to change. A lot of times that might be us. A lot of times as the business owners, especially in small business, we have our way of doing things, and that's why we're in business for ourselves, is because we just want to do it the way we want to do it, and we don't want to be told how to do anything. And that's not always the best thing. Actually, it's rarely the best thing. A very wise man in business once told me the reason he was so successful is because he surrounded himself with really good people, and that is a good and a wise thing to do. So when you discover, hopefully early on, the people within the organization who are strongly resistant, who may, and I hate to use the word sabotage, but even if it's subconscious, they may be really resistant to this new strategy or this new direction that the organization is going in. And so identifying them early and coming alongside them, helping to motivate them and to equip them, so that they can take hold of this new direction, help them to see why it's in their best interest and in the best interest of the organization, which includes all their coworkers and everybody. So as we go through the strategy implementation, let's kind of look at some things that we might need to be aware of. The marketing mix component factors. When you're working with your marketing department, or the people who focus on the product, place, promotion, and price of your product and organization, these are what they call the 4 P's of marketing. They're concerned with the quality of the product, the style. They're concerned with things like packaging, warranty. As far as the place goes, they want to know what the distribution channels are going to look like under the new strategy. They're going to need to know how sales territories are going to be effective if you have an outside sales force, transportation carriers, inventory levels. As far as promotion, they're going to want to know how to do the advertising. They're going to want to understand personal selling. They're going to want to know how publicity is going to work under this new strategy. Pricing, the level of pricing, discounts, allowances, payment terms. These are all things that your marketing people are going to have questions about, and you as the strategist who are going to be handing off their portion of implementing this strategy to them are going to need to be able to answer some pretty hard questions in dealing with these things. I mean, an example would be, let's say you were in let's say your product was priced around the middle of the market. So if you added up all of the people's products who sell similar things to you and divided it by the number of people that you looked at, there would be, you guys are right about the middle price. But you decided with this new strategy that, we're going to try and be a low-cost leader. Think how that's going to impact your marketing. Think how that's going to impact how the advertising people actually put forward your message to the community that you guys sell to. Your finance and accounting department, the issues that you are going to run into there are going to deal with raising capital. Are you going to have to get money in order to implement this strategy? Does it mean adding new resources to the company, whether human resources or new facilities? If it does require new equipment, are you going to lease that equipment or are you going to buy it? Dividend payout ratio. Next time, if you have investors, next time it comes time for dividends to be paid out, Is new investment going to require kind of taking some of that dividend and reinvesting it in the organization as opposed to paying it out to the shareholders? And is that communicated well to the shareholders? To extend time on accounts receivable, if you sell to people who pay within 30 days or 60 days, will the transition require extending that and giving them a little bit more leeway with that? If you handle cash, are you going to have more cash on hand? Your research and development department, you're going to run into some things there. Are they going to be emphasizing product or process improvements? Your R&D people, their main concern is developing new products and making improvements to old products. So how does the new strategy affect them? What are the changes that they're going to have to make within their within their division? Are they going to be leaders in R&D, or are they going to be followers? Are they going to be on the bleeding edge of technology within your industry, or are they going to be kind of like the knockoff brand? Are you going to spend how much money, high, low, average amount of money on R&D? Are you going to do your R&D internally or externally, or some combination thereof? So these are some things that you'll need to think through with your R&D department if you have an internal R&D department, or if you need to think through the R&D department that you're looking to hire on, they're going to have the same questions. Your information technology, as far as the implementation of your strategy, your IT people are going to be concerned with what needs to change on the intranet, how you communicate within the organization. They're going to want to know how it's going to affect the point of sale system. It's going to need to have some reprogramming done to make things more clear, make it easier to use for your sales force or the people that are on the front line dealing with point of sale systems. Your website, how is that touch point for your customers, your external internet presence? How is that going to be affected by this strategy? What changes need to be made? Do there need to be new databases added, new pages added? What is that all going to look like with the new strategy? Mobile apps, are there new things? Does the new strategy allow your customers to do new things? And if so, how do we get those new things to them more effectively on their mobile devices? Hardware and software. Do we need to acquire more resources as far as computer systems go, more servers to be able to safely handle employee information and customer information? Strategy implementation. Going back to this, our vision and our mission is really the foundation of our business. But as an organization who desires to glorify God, we know that there's no other foundation than that of Christ Jesus. And so even that informs our vision and mission statement as a business that is being conducted in God. So the Apostle Paul says it this way. He says, "By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise master builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one must be careful how he builds. No one can lay another foundation other than the one already laid, which is Christ Jesus." So Paul sees himself as a master builder. He set forth a foundation that was Christ Jesus himself, the foundation for this business, reflecting the wisdom of Paul, was that we laid a foundation with the written vision and the written mission statement for this particular organization. And now there's other people who are going to be building on it. All these different divisions within your organization, whether it's finance or marketing, your sales force, your customer service people, everything is going to, these are people who are going to be building on that foundation. And so we need to help them to be wise about the way that they're building on that foundation. So we need to help them to remember the beginning, remember the vision that they're trying to attain to, remember what the mission of the organization is, so that when they think through how they do their daily work and how they are a part of this organization that is building on the foundation that has been set forth, that they understand that they are doing this in a way that is going to be able to stand the test of time, essentially, because there's going to be difficult business cycles that your organization is going to go through, and if you have a team who is implementing your strategy well, and you've done all your planning and everything, and you've found yourselves in the will of God, and everybody's kind of working on the same page with this, you're going to have an organization that's going to last a really long time. It's going to provide great service to the community that you're in. And so helping them to remember the beginning, understanding that this business is a reflection of what we see in the wisdom found in the scriptures, and because the builder of all things is God. And if we accept that as business people, then we can allow God to work in the midst of us, even in our business lives, if not especially in our business lives. So investing care is going to be important. Spending time with people, communicating, connecting with your people. We've talked about that a lot. I can't really stress it enough. Really, it's all about relationships. How you relate with everyone within your organization, how they relate with the vision and mission, how they relate with the strategy. Making sure that all the communication that happens is clear, it's concise, and it's compelling. And then finally, as we go through this process, again, testing is so important. As we test ourselves as individuals, to make sure that we are attaining to what is expected of us, to make sure that the strategy is being implemented properly, even making sure that the data that we collected is still accurate, so that we can flourish and that we can produce the results that we're expecting. And that brings us to strategy review, evaluation, and control. We want to review our strategy from time to time to make sure that everything is still in alignment, because things change. We collected a lot of data when we looked at our strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, but the marketplace is changing. We are changing as an organization, so we need to make sure that we are implementing the proper strategies given where we are as an organization. Evaluating where we are with the implementation of the strategy, making adjustments as necessary, and placing controls in place so that if there are scenarios where perhaps there's a division or an individual who is kind of wandering off in one direction or the other, and to bring them back in and to reconnect them and to revitalize that vision in their heart and in their mind, so that they can continue to do a really good job for us. So we're going to be looking at the nature of strategy evaluation, framework for strategy evaluation. We're going to be looking at some published resources that are available, characteristics of an effective evaluation system. We're going to talk a little bit about contingency planning and auditing, and then we're finally going to look at the value of having computers to help us to evaluate strategies. So the nature of strategy evaluation said, the wisdom from the ancient scriptures says, but let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself and not his neighbor. So given that wisdom, we want people to understand that as we implement this strategy, they're going to have decisions to make, and that those decisions that they make will have consequences, either positive or negative. We want to make sure that they understand that they're evaluating themselves in a timely manner, that what they're doing on a day-to-day basis is in alignment with the strategy, making sure that the basis for the strategy is still in place when we go back to actually evaluate the strategy. What kind of results they're getting as individuals, what kind of plans, and if they need to reform, if they need to reform their daily practices, if perhaps they've been doing something a certain way, but as they've been thinking through this new strategy, they think they need to change this or that, and maybe we didn't think of it, so they know that they're free to come to a supervisor and say, hey, listen, the strategy is this, but this is kind of the way that I've been doing it. I don't really know, this doesn't really jive anymore. I think maybe if we did it this way, it would be more in alignment with the mission and vision. And we want that kind of feedback. We want to encourage that sort of thing. So we want to encourage our people to always be testing their own work, so that they can make sure that they're staying on track, and that's going to be helpful for us. So if you have a people who feels empowered and who feels and is comfortable with an actual open door policy, not just saying, oh, yeah, we have an open door policy, but every time they come to you to tell you something that needs to change, you're like, yeah, just keep doing it the way you're doing it. It's sad to say, but there's a lot of managers and leaders out there that do that, and that's not okay. That's not good for motivation. It's not good for the organization. And so we need to have an actual open door policy where we can sit and think through things with our people and help them to be part of the decision-making process. Each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. The reason that we want to make sure that we have this open communication and this encouragement to all of our people to be testing their own work is because your organization and the departments within your organization are going to be tested. It'll be tested by the marketplace. It's going to be tested by customers. It's going to be tested on a million different fronts. And if you build something that's solid, it will endure. And not only will it endure, but it'll flourish and it'll be fruitful. So as an organization, we want to review the basis of our strategy, making sure again that our strategy is on point, even as we're getting this additional feedback from the people who are actually implementing it. We want to measure organizational performance. So we need to figure out a way to effectively identify that each participant in each division within the organization are contributing to realizing the strategy as effectively as possible. And so we're going to have some KPIs or key performance indicators, some things that we can identify that are going to let us know if we're staying on track or not. And then we're going to need to know how and when to take corrective action as necessary. And then the other thing about having a good strategy evaluation framework is we can identify those paths of righteousness, those things that our people are doing that are excellent, those things that our people are doing that are helping the vision and the mission to go forward, helping the organization to become what you guys envisioned it always being, and being about the kind of business that you have stated that you're about. The strategy evaluation framework, the question is the strategy internally consistent? And this is something that and we're going to be going through a series of questions, because evaluating is really all about asking questions. A lot of times very hard questions. So is the strategy internally consistent? So if our strategy looked really good on paper, but once it actually got out to the people, is it actually consistent with what we're trying to do? Is it consistent with the environment? How is the market that we're serving, how is it receiving this new strategy? Is the strategy appropriate in view of the available resources? Maybe we over projected our sales and made decisions based on inflated numbers. That's going to show up. Like I said, the fires are going to test it, and we're going to realize very quickly if we kind of exaggerated what we were capable of. Is the strategy appropriate? Does the strategy involve an acceptable degree of risk? Again, once we've started to implement these things and actually started to flesh it all out, then it comes to the question, are we taking on the level of financial risk, human resource risk, risk to the success or failure of our organization based on this strategy, or do we need to reevaluate? Does the strategy have an appropriate time framework? If we set our goal for 2 to 5 years, if we set our annual goal, if we have quarterly goals, are those actually? Do we actually have the time to accomplish these things? Are they attainable? Those are things that we need to rethink as we're going through this strategy and as we're going through this process of evaluating where we've been with it. Is the strategy workable? Again, if we designed a strategy and made choices to implement something and got financially behind this thing, and come to find out later that it sounded great on paper, but in reality it's just not working right. And sometimes you just have to take it on the chin and reevaluate and possibly choose a different strategy. Is the strategy in alignment with God's will for our organization? This is probably the most important question that you'll ask. Is what you are doing as a business something that is bringing glory to God or not? And if not, well, again, it might be a strong imperative to change direction. The strategy evaluation framework with regard to the strategy and your SWOT analysis. Some questions that we would need to be asking as we go through this process of evaluation. Are our internal strengths still strengths? Have we added other internal strengths, and if so, what are they? As you communicate with your people and find out what's going on in the different areas of your organization, you're going to be able to discover these things. It's another encouragement to communicate with your people on a regular basis, not only informally but also formally. Are our internal weaknesses still weaknesses? Do we now have other internal weaknesses, and if so, what are they? Are our external opportunities still opportunities? Are there now external opportunities? If so, what are they? What are our external threats? Are they still threats? Are there now other external threats? And if so, what are they? Are we subject to a hostile takeover? So when we went through this whole process of identifying internal and external factors, we identified what our strengths and weaknesses were at a specific point in time. We can all agree, and any of us that have been in business for any length of time understand that things change, and unfortunately they change pretty rapidly sometimes within business. And so we need to kind of be on top of these things reasonably. The competitive landscape often changes quickly. How have competitors reacted to these new strategies? How have competitor strategies changed? Did they respond to our strategy? Have major competitors' strengths and weaknesses changed? Why are competitors making certain strategic changes? Why are some competitors' strategies more successful than others? How satisfied are our competitors with their present market position and profitability? I mean, if you've got a competitor out there who is just hungry, you may have not even thought of them as a competitor before, but now all of a sudden they're taking huge chunks of your market share because they're doing a better job than you. And if that's what's happening, man, you need to reevaluate pretty quickly. How far can our major competitors be pushed before retaliating? In business, you're in a competitive environment. If you lower prices on something, you may be sparking a price war within that specific business. And is that something that you're prepared to hold to? This happened a lot in the business that I was in banking, finance, or stock brokerage. When online trading came about, it was, you had one firm came out with $12 trades, and next thing you know, you had $9 trades, and then you had $7 trades, and now you got somebody popping up with $4.95 trades. And you just have to decide what price point is best for you, given the service and the line of products that you offer. And finally, how could we more effectively cooperate with our competitors? Seems like a strange question, but a lot of times we can co-labor with our competitors in a way that's fruitful for both of us and provides a better product or service to the community that we serve. Strategy evaluation framework, strategy and finances. As you're communicating with your finance department, they are numbers people, and that's a good thing. This gives you a very quantitative look at how your organization is doing financially, and that should give you a strong indication as how your implementation is working, how your strategy is working. So they're going to report on things like your return on investment, return on equity, the profit margin, market share, debt to equity, earnings per share, sales growth. These are all very important things. They're going to be able to bring an asset growth. They're going to be able to bring this information to you, and you're going to be able to compare it and contrast it with how you were doing before you implemented the strategy, back as far as you have records to identify those things. And when you actually track these things, you'll be able to identify your progress and be able to hopefully grow your business more effectively, knowing how the decisions that you guys are making are actually affecting the business. Strategy and other qualitative factors. How good is, and qualitative factors are basically, we're kind of moving beyond the numbers, and this is going to be based on how you feel as an organization, as the strategists, entrepreneurs, business owners, given where you guys are and what your vision and mission is. So this is a little bit more of the intuition part of the process. How good is the firm's balance of investments between high risk and low risk projects? How good is the firm's balance of investments between long-term and short-term projects? How good is the firm's balance of investments between slow-growing markets and fast-growing markets? And how good is the firm's balance of investments among different divisions? Are you getting the right resources to the right people? To what extent are the firm's alternative strategies socially responsible? If being socially responsible is important to you as an organization and as an organization basing itself on Christian values, social responsibility ought to be important. What are the relationships among the firm's key internal and external strategic factors? When we think about the relationships that are going on between your strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, making sure, as we talked about in our previous session, that those are matched properly in order to celebrate your strengths by making the most use of them, and to deal with any weaknesses or threats by taking advantage of your opportunities and implementing those strengths appropriately. And then how are major competitors likely to respond to particular strategies? Again, you can only know so much ethically about your competitors, and so by thinking through how they're responding or likely to respond to the strategies that you're implementing, then you can be prepared to that. But again, asking the questions is the first start in that process, so that you have thought those things through. Published sources of strategy evaluation information. These are places where you can find information on your particular industry, and from that information you can kind of gauge where you are in relationship to that. Fortune 1000 is a list of the largest manufacturers that Fortune magazine puts out. Fortune 50 looks at retailers, transport, utilities, banks, insurance, diversified financial institutions. And then Forbes puts out the annual report on American industry. There's also some great websites out there like Statista.com where you can gather information on small business. The evaluation system that you put in place in order to kind of oversee the organization, we want something that's economical, because we don't want to spend a whole lot of our resources on testing. We want to test ourselves and make sure that we're doing what we ought to do, that we're going so that we can avoid any major downfalls. But we also want to make sure that it makes sense. We don't want to have too much evaluation, too much control going on, because that can stifle creativity, and there comes a point when you're just not getting the return on investment that you would when you spend too much money on it. So economical. We want to have the appropriate amount of information, not too much, not too little. We can have just a huge amount of data, so much so that it just backs us up, and we aren't actually able to be agile as an organization, which is what we need to be. The appropriate amount of control needs to be in place. Again, we need to know when to manage. We want to make sure that we have space within our organization for our people to perform at their best levels, and that rarely happens when we're micromanaging them. So we need to make sure that we need to make sure that we have control, appropriate levels of control in place, and we make sure that we're getting timely information through this evaluation system. We need to the time dimension is aligned with the time span as far as doing the evaluations and identifying the information that we actually need. We want to make sure that our evaluation system gives us a true picture of where we are as an organization, where our divisions are as their part of the organization, and where even our individual employees are. We want something that's going to be able to be true, because if we have the truth of what's going on, then we're going to be able to make better decisions. And ultimately, we want to make sure we have an evaluation system that fosters mutual understanding, trust, and wisdom through the entire organization. And so that's basically what an effective evaluation system is going to look like. As we have this system in place, we also want to have thought through certain contingency plans. Contingency plans will exist so that if something doesn't go the way that we hope it to optimally, that we will be able to have a plan B or plan C. Contingency planning includes identifying both beneficial and unfavorable events that could possibly derail the strategy or strategies. Again, we want to put the appropriate amount of resources into thinking these things through. Obviously, it's going to be a finite number because there is a million different things that could happen. So we need to identify those things that are most likely to happen or possibly happen, so that we can plan for these things. Specify trigger points. Calculate about when contingent events are about to occur. This can be helpful with when you're gathering numbers from your finance people. When you see that something's not going properly in your earnings, or maybe your markup on your product isn't what it's supposed to be or wasn't what you're expecting it to be, that's when we can actually make some adjustments as we need to. To use a stock market example, when we invested in a company in the stock market, they'd have an order called a stop order. And so as the stock was going up, we would let it go up, but we would set a trigger point where, let's say the stock was at $50. If all of a sudden it pulled back to $49, we would say, let's go ahead and sell at $49. If it kept going up, then great, let it go up. But we would have that trigger in place saying, okay, that's the most loss that we were willing to take, or that's the most we're allowed to decrease in value before we jump ship and reevaluate. Assess the impact of each contingent event, how it's going to actually impact the overall strategy, how it's going to impact cost, etc. Estimate the potential benefit or harm of each contingent event. Develop contingency plans. Be sure that contingency plans are compatible with current strategy and economic feasibility. So we're not talking about changing the whole strategy here. We're talking about something going awry and not happening the way we expected it to or planned for. And so what we need to do to bring everything back into alignment with the strategy. And that happens by having this evaluation system in place so that we can identify these things early and respond quickly and effectively. Assess the counter impact of each contingency plan. Determine early warning signals for key contingent events and monitor those early warning signals. This happens in everything from how we evaluate our employees to how we evaluate particular results, sales results, promotion results. So identifying those warning signals early is definitely going to be important to our contingency planning. And then finally, for contingent events with reliable early warning signals, develop advanced action plans to take advantage of the available lead time. if you know that you're headed in a bad direction and you know that you're going to have lead time to avoid any catastrophes or crises, take advantage of that lead time. And part of the way that you can take advantage of that lead time is being aware that there will be lead time and having something in place so that your people and you know how to respond to that given circumstance. Auditing, going through and making sure everything's on track financially. You want to make sure that your organization is crossing your T's and dotting your I's, making sure that you are taking advantage of all of the appropriate tax breaks, making sure that you are reporting what needs to be reported, making sure that you are doing what is in the best interest financially of the organization, of your employees, of the community that you serve, which means doing the right thing when it comes to your finances and how you handle that. Using computers to evaluate strategy. Your strategy is going to be such that computer systems nowadays can gather information far more effectively and more on a real-time basis than if you try to do these things manually. So making sure that your computer systems and your IT is designed, installed, operated, and the people that need to have access to certain information have access to it in the appropriate time, so that as all this information comes to decision makers who are responsible really for doing these ongoing evaluations and making these adjustments, implementing contingent plans when necessary, that they have what they need to integrate the intuition that's needed, as well as the hard data or the analysis that's needed in order to evaluate where you are. And ultimately, it comes back to the idea of this vision and mission statement that we have set forth, and identifying these strategies so that we are moving in a positive direction to be a blessing to our community, be a blessing to our employees, and of course, to receive blessing ourselves, to be part of something that is bigger than ourselves. And so this that really concludes this segment of as we look at the strategy. And we're going to close with looking at the scriptures that we talked about today and how they impacted this ancient wisdom. We talked about how when we feel under-resourced or we feel like the odds are against us, that we can have hope as small business owners, entrepreneurs, managers, and leaders, that God tends to shine and is more willing to shine in those moments when he is going to be glorified. He says, "Then the Lord said to Gideon, the people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into your hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me." If we want our organization to be saved, to be blessed, to be favored, then we need to be willing to go through those seasons, not really understanding all that God is doing, not really feeling completely comfortable with the circumstances, but moving forward in the direction that God is leading us. The Apostle Paul talked to us about what it means to lay a foundation and to empower others to build on that foundation and to hold them accountable, warning them ahead of time that they need to be careful how they build. And so he says, by the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise master builder, and someone else is building on it, but each one must be careful how he builds. No one can lay another foundation other than one already laid, which is Christ Jesus. And so as we as Christian business people, as people who are desiring to glorify God and utilize God's wisdom in the workplace, this is just a strong encouragement for us to empower and to come alongside our people, our team, to help them to be as successful as possible, to encourage them to test their own work. The apostle says, let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor. So here's a scenario where we want to, if you have a workforce who's empowered to test their own work, to make sure that they're doing a good job so that they know if they're doing a good job or not, then you're going to have a more effective workforce. and they're going to be able to take seriously what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And finally, we looked at this. It says, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. So there's going to be testing, whether they test themselves or not. There's going to be evaluations, and there's going to be external factors and internal factors. And someone who's doing a shoddy job, it's going to be revealed. You as business owners, as managers and leaders, you need to be there to help identify these things early, so that you're building up your people, so that they are prepared to stand through the flames of testing, and hopefully your organization will come out the other side more pure, more effective, more stable in organization. So again, I thank you guys for joining me for these sessions of strategic management in a post-Christian era. Again, my name is Justin with Ekklesia. I thank you guys. I hope that it is of value to you. And if you do have any questions going forth after these sessions end, feel free to contact me via email. The email is ekklesiaprayers@gmail.com. And again, I thank you guys so much for your participation, and hopefully we'll see some positive changes happening around town here in Statesville.